the state developed another test, which was called the PSSA Modified, PSSA-M. And that was to really target the students that weren't able to take the PSSA, but the PASA wasn't appropriate for them either. And when they first rolled that out, anyone in special education could take it. It had an open percentage. It's gone through many iterations then. So maybe a couple, 2-3 years after that, the state said, okay, now only 2% of our kids are allowed to take the PSSA-M, and that's in special education. And only 1% of our students are allowed to take the PASA. So they started saying, we only want certain kids to be able to take these alternative assessments, okay? So that gives you kind of the history of where we've been. The PSSA-M has gone away. That was stopped many, many years ago, and it came ultimately from a federal perspective that all students either should be taking an alternative assessment because they're taking alternative core content, or everyone should be expected to take the PSSA. Pennsylvania has given ultimately districts a lot of leeway in the past few years of not holding themselves fully to the 1% number. So we've been able to make IEP team decisions about when a student is able to take the PASA. That brings me to what we've received in March, which is a letter from PD, Bureau of Curriculum Assessment and Instruction. And ultimately what happened was in October 2023, the U.S. Department of Education notified PDE that Pennsylvania has been placed on a high-risk status, meaning Pennsylvania has not held themselves accountable to the 1% rule, meaning Pennsylvania has allowed too many kids to take the PASA or ultimately not take the PSSA. So what that means, that rule now pushes down to the districts. So this letter from the Department of Education got sent out to all of colleagues across Pennsylvania and said that 1% is now going to be a complete line in the sand. It has to be 1%. And what they've ultimately really looked at is they've looked at the PASA eligibility criteria. And so now they've honed in on a major point for us, which is to even be considered for the PASA, you have to your starting point for eligibility is looking at an IQ number, which wasn't what it used to be. It used to be needs of the student, the IEP decision, and now it's going to what's the IQ number. And even that in itself isn't going to be enough. There's other eligibility pieces, but in order to even be considered for the PASA, the IQ number is paramount, which is taking the decision-making away from the IEP team and the parent being part of that IEP team. So we're going to be stuck with that.
Was that a state decision to do it that way?
Federal.
But being driven by the
feds.
federal limits.
Yes.
We don't care how many kids we have in special ed, it's still a percent.
1% can take the PASA now.
1% of
Our special
population
education,
or special ed,
our special education kids. 1% of our identified special education students,
no matter what
No
their
matter what.
identification is.
no matter what.
What was our percentage typically?
We're looking at sometimes 3 to 5% of our kids that we were allowing for an alternative assessment. So most of our students in our AS programming at Brownstown would have, we would have given an alternative assessment. All of our kids in our multiple disabilities class typically take the alternative assessment. Many kids in our life skill classes, but we made it an IEP team decision, and we really looked at the needs of the student.
So we were basing it on students' real needs and abilities.
Mm-hmm.
And the feds, or the state through the feds, are just looking at numbers.
1%.
Mm-hmm.
Is it still Scantron? I know I'm dating myself, but is it just fill in little
Yeah.
bubbles? Why don't you go in pencil and be like, draw bunnies? And then we'll submit that when we have to remember. I was that kid.
So what that ultimately means for us is we're going to have about 7 kids that will qualify for the PASA. So that means even all of our students within certain programs won't necessarily qualify for that test, because that 1% is going to be a complete line in the sand moving forward. And so
Do
it's
the feds not realize that the needs are growing? I mean, are they completely tone deaf to the reality of all this?
Yes. Short answer.
our special
And what
education
can we do to
attorney.
make them listen too?
I would love to send you the response from Sweet Stevens in there, what they believe is wrong with the system in terms of this 1% rule.
Well, I don't understand it real well, and I can see
You
what's
can see the
wrong
problem
with it.
with it.
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, when we look at our special education plan, the special education plan addressed overall special ed students not participating in the PSSA, which included passive participation, and it included parents who just wanted to opt their kids out of any testing. And we do, in this area, in this county, have probably a higher than average amount of opt-outs for religious reasons. Therefore, that's just a parent choice that we're gonna have to be okay with. But I think what happens is though, you did have, from a special ed standpoint, my experience in my previous, once you start telling parents that their kid is not eligible for the alternative assessment, they don't wanna put their child through that stress, anxiety, rigor of the regular PSSA, so you're gonna see your opt-out numbers go up ultimately, which as a parent, you can understand that choice.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
so-
Why would you have your child take a test that you know isn't appropriate for them? And I guess we're not hiding that fact.
You're not.
Good.
So I think the bottom line
So we
is,
imagine
that was an
that-
indicator on our plan, but
We imagine that indicator will continue.
what's right for kids?
Maybe, and it could already be happening, these parents are one of our best possibilities for some advocacy here. Because the alternative test did tell them something about their child. Now they're getting none of that feedback.
True.
So
just don't
they're
understand-
actually being denied a service that they need under the guise of a service that the government
Yeah.
provides.
Maybe some don't wanna know.
Yeah, and if they don't listen to us, maybe they'll listen to the parents themselves.
I just never really understood why the PSSAs causes anxiety. Cause you do a test in class, it's not the SATs or it's not a grade.
No,
It's
but
just,
just the idea of testing stresses kids,
yeah, but you still have
especially
to,
these kids. It
Yeah,
stresses them.
class.
Sitting there for a couple hours.
Well, and you're talking with the 1% rule, you're talking a population of your students being asked to take an assessment on standards that they're not even addressing as part of their regular.
as a regular
Program.
program.
Yeah,
You get chew gum in class, I mean, it's a lot of benefits to taking the PSSAs.
Settle down.
Why-
Anything else, Sarah?
Why don't you
that's
bring
it.
that up there?
give me strength, please.
But if you ever have any questions about the special ed plan, it's on our website, so you can
Yeah.
always take a look at that and reach out to me if you have any questions. Thank you.
This is not gonna get better, is it?
It's not.
Thank you. Lancaster County Academy budget is posted for you. We're holding, bottom line here, we're holding what it's costing all of our member districts to the same amount as they paid for the last, I think, 3 years. I don't know that we'll be able to hold that another year, but we do everything we can to be very careful with that budget.
It's a good
the
program.
growth- The growth that we've had these last couple of years has generated the revenues that we can afford to do this. And given we used to have practically no reserves, and now we have some very generous ones, so. But we will be using that to bring in additional administration. We have 2 locations, that's a load of work. But for now, that's the bottom line on that, as far as what it costs us. Questions on our budget? Okay, the last thing here is review of the proposed language. That's not really what it is for 123. If you remember, Mrs. Kapka had brought up an issue about participation of other school districts that we play. I asked her to give us some idea of what she was proposing, and she has provided you with, in front of you, Southside School District in Allegheny County, Hempfield School District in Lancaster County uses this exact same policy. We have a couple of things we could do here. You've just gotten this, you may want time to read it, so if you'd like, and Mrs. Kapka knows I was going to suggest this, we move it to next week so you have some time to read it. The other choice is perhaps you'd like Mrs. Kapka to give you some idea of what it is she hopes us to get from these. So let me give you, especially we have two new people here. I finally found my past records from when we passed the new 123. It's only a year old. We went through a huge amount of work. We went through 5 months, almost 6 months of discussion. At the time, I offered the board all the resources that Hempfield and other school districts have used to address this, and they wanted none of it. They wanted us to focus on what we found was important. We spent a lot of time hashing through the different options of what we could put in a policy, unable to find one that really was fair and usable. And so the compromise was sort of, what we need to do is keep in mind our obligations to the students and to the law. That was the big thing, that we have to obey the law. And the subtitle of obeying the law is like it or not. And many of us don't like it, but we know that's the law and we have to obey it because we have an obligation to protect the district from lawsuits and an obligation to protect the board and the board members, because when lawsuits show up, they often sue board members, in which case you're responsible for your legal fees. Now that's the real reality. We get told, you know, what you do, you will have to pay for if someone questions you. We went through this long discussion, and the one thing we all agreed we didn't like was that PIAA had tried to ignore it by saying, well, the principals will decide these issues of who qualifies to play on what team. We felt that was inappropriate, as do most districts, so we wrote it to stay with PIAA, so it includes the principals, but the athletic director and the superintendent will address it on an individual basis, but we did add in the concerns of board members, which included asking them to look at competitive advantage and safety. I had done some background, how many kids this is. I found out what percentage of kids participate in sports, which was 30%, give or take, for boys and girls. More difficult to find how many transgender students there are because there were no polls. Compared the two numbers and came up with, if you spread it evenly across all the United States, it might be 50 per state, which is less than 1 per school district. But as one board member made very clear, all you need is 1. So the board felt it needed to prepare it if there was 1, what are we going to do? At that point, we had no such issues. Superintendent told us he had had no one ask about this. So we came up with that compromise on our policy, and we've had it for a year. I think 123 is adequate as it is. No one's mentioned revisiting 123. I don't think any of us want to go through that again. But Mrs. Kapka has come up with what you're suggesting, another one. So do you want to explain what the goal is, the issue is, and the goal is here?
This would be an addendum, like 123.1, like we wouldn't touch 123. But this would break it down more so of girls play on girls, boys play on boys. If it's something like field hockey, and a boy wants to play on field hockey, then because there's no boys field hockey team, he would be able to play on the girls field hockey team. So it just breaks a lot of that down. But it's just taking our current 123 fairness a little bit further.
Well, when you
With the-
asked for this, and I went back to check our
Yes,
our
I'm taking it
minutes.
a step back from who we compete with, because we don't have something in place for us.
Okay,
So we can't be putting that on others if
okay,
we
so
don't have
your
anything.
original request to consider
Yes.
what we do is off the table now.
Right, it's this, I'd like to add this for us to hold ourselves, because we can't ask others what we don't do
So
for us.
123.1 sort of is a footnote
Yeah, it
to
kind of,
123, which in a way is
it's
kind
more
of changing.
detailed.
One thing I do not want to do is end up doing anything that contradicts what we have. So, right now, I sort of recommend, especially considering you're changing your ultimate goal.
Right.
You give us a week to read this.
Absolutely.
Does anyone feel we should try to dig into it now?
So I just want to clarify what I'm like thinking about. So what, and I briefly looked at this when I walked in the door. So this appears to be as though you're proposing that we are completely revisiting 123.
Well, this would be an additional, like, more detailed, like, breaking out 123, like, that's pretty general, but this is more specific guidelines for who plays on what team for our own. Cause like 123 is more general.
123 allowed the decision to be made on a case-by-case basis.
This is
This takes that
specifics.
away and already makes part of that decision in advance, which is exactly what we chose not to do before. So in a way, what it does is it changes 123.
Right.
A little bit.
A lot of it.
Still a lot of it, cause like 123 is very undetailed, this is detailed.
Purposely.
Yes.
So,
I would like detail. Cause these other schools have a separate 123, which is the sports, and then this is the sex-based, which
Yeah.
is separate.
But what it does, it addresses in 123 what we didn't feel we needed to address in detail and allow it on a case-by-case basis. This takes that away and says, no, in these cases, here's the guidelines, that's it.
Right. And so these are
Much
just,
different from what you told us you originally wanted to do.
right, well, that's the whole thing, like I can't hold other, no, we're not,
Absolutely.
yeah. So that's what I'm like, okay, we gotta take a step back and look at our policies.
Well, I do have, and I can provide it if you want, the legal advice that we got. And the current policy we have now aligns with what, legally we have to do. Since then, there has been notification from the Department of Education. The letter I have is dated March of this year. And it references the OCR, the Federal Office of Civil Rights, the ones that the overseer for Title IX. And I'll just read you one line out of it. Schools must provide all students with the same access to programs and activities, regardless of their sexual orientation or general identity. Schools cannot disclose a student's private information, such as a student's gender, assigned at birth. That is considered confidential. So if that's confidential, I don't know how we use it as a basis for participation. That's just this month. We didn't have that before, but
That's what, like,
it is something we're gonna have to deal with when we consider this.
Right, that's what, we can bring in an attorney, cause Hempfield has that as part of their policy. The gender and concurrent registration, all that. So that's an aspect that the other one didn't have, so we'd have to talk to an attorney and bring one in and see what they say.
The first thing I would do is, now we have changed solicitors since then. but I would want to know from our current solicitor if their advice is any different. So we'll,
We've spoken on the topic.
okay. And do they have any recommendations the board should have, either private or public?
I think it's fair, I think, talking with Mr. Litz, his legal opinion is said that he has not changed on that since what it was when he spoke with the board last, is he wouldn't recommend to our board or any boards any policy movement on this topic until the federal government gives more guidance on Title IX,
Yeah.
which I get, they keep kicking down the road.
Yeah, well,
But he would-
I have copies of
He,
the
he,
red. of the
yeah,
regs.
his strong recommendation would be for districts not to do anything. You're talking about Title IX, you're also talking about Pennsylvania Human Relations Act.
Yeah, they have that listed here too.
So he just said, proceed, there's definite legal exposure and liability with it. I mean, boards will do what they wanna do, but
Okay, so you have some time, board, to read what's being proposed here and the information we have, and we will have that discussion.
Do you have that electronically, Idette? Just because I'd like to read the whole thing in context.
The letter?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I don't, but I will have a copy made before I leave tonight and give it to you.
is that the Dear Colleague letter that was
I'll
sent?
take one also if you don't mind, for me.
Okay.
I'm just reading it
Yeah.
Is
in
it the one you
context with
sent?
you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's the
okay.
Dear Colleague letter that I shared several weeks ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what
Oh, it's the same one? Okay, I
Yeah,
have
that's
that,
the
yeah, I
same
have
one, that's just,
Okay.
yeah, I didn't remember if everyone got that or not.
Yeah.
I do have copies of the Title IX, regs, even though they're not, activated yet, they're just on hold, but they did release some of that, but, we will pick this up next week after you've had a chance to read everything.
I would also encourage those who haven't yet to read the PIAA rules and regs as well, just to refresh.
What I will do is, I don't have electronic, but I can ask Marilyn to scan and send you.
I have it. If that's the same one, I didn't realize it was the same one.
No, I'm talking about the PIAA.
Oh,
regs.
yes,
You know,
that would
I
be
think I
helpful.
have a copy of those. I'm sure in here I have just about everything. So I'll see if I can find the PIAA, and if you want the list of Title IX that they're proposing. And send those to you.
So I just have one more question, Diane. I just wanna make sure like I'm super clear on what the like proposal is per se. So the only reason that you're requesting that we're revisiting 123 is because we don't have anything in there about opponents.
Well, I don't know if we ever wanna go down the opponent route, but the first thing we need to do is look at in-house and what our policies are for it. So we can't request others if we ever wanna do that. Cause that's a separate conversation that we can have in the future, like this is something we'd have to do first.
The difference between revisiting 123 and putting in 123.1 is negligible. Because basically what she's asking us to do is what we didn't do before.
So what we were originally trying to do.
Originally, it was suggested we do.
Right.
Can't say the whole board was trying because we had people on both sides. But what we avoided doing for legal reasons before, you would like us in a separate policy to do, which is much the same as saying we're going to change policy 123.
So we're revisiting the whole thing again, right? Just
Turns
making
out,
sure.
Turns out.
and we will address that
Okay,
with the rest of this discussion. But I think first everyone has to be perfectly clear on what we're talking
yes, I
about.
just wanna make sure I understand
Yeah, because what I was looking at,
what we're talking about.
hoping is policies like this, that's why I give you ideas, and of course, if we go down this route, we have an attorney and we say we like this, we don't like this, and what we're looking for, what we're not looking for.
When you talk about attorney, are you talking about our solicitors or are you talking about the Independent Law Center?
Either or, the
No,
Independence
it's
Law
not an either
Center,
or because they are very different.
I understand, the Independence Law Center will come in and give us a free consultation, we'll answer any of our questions, I'll say, yes, you can do this, no, you can't. He's the one who wrote these two policies. He's wrote a lot over the state. So, they have experience in this, whereas Jeff Blitz, he doesn't do it. So I kind of like an attorney who has experience in this versus somebody who's kind of, well, I've not done this before, kind of.
When
Well-
you say experience in this, you mean?
Experience in
they've-
writing this and implementing it with boards.
And litigating it?
If need be, they will litigate.
Oh, if need be, but they have
Well-
not litigated it.
They've litigated other stuff on this topic. But it's not a question I've asked him, but I will.
One of the decisions we made before, when I gave the board the entire list, was, it included people who we already knew stood on one or the other side of this issue. We chose to listen to our solicitor because he doesn't stand on either side of the issue. He's just for the legal one. The Independent Law Center is a very different animal. Okay, this is their purpose. So if we bring in someone like them, we have to bring in someone on the other side too, whose purpose is not doing it. Which means we're going through everything we went through a year ago and
Except that
already
you
came
have-
up with a compromise, but I will do.
You have two new board members.
I understand that. So we'll hash it all out next week, what next steps we want to take, if any. Okay? That's, I got rid of my agenda when I started this.
That was the last item.
Okay, we'll move on. Are there any questions on next week's agenda? Oh, let me get back. Do you want to do this next week or next month during discussion?
It would be next month,
Yeah,
Next
let's do
month.
next
because
month.
it would be a
during
working
Okay,
session.
okay,
Yeah.
next month. I just want to make sure that, if I don't put it there, somebody says what happened to it. Okay, so next,
And then it gives you time to decide if we agree if it's a yes or no,
okay,
to
yeah,
pursue it. We have not pursued policy changes, and we've elected to pursue policy
Okay.
changes. I'm not sure we didn't do a vote. I think it was more just a general consensus.
no, we took a vote.
We did take a vote?
We took a vote, yes,
Tuesday,
I have a vote.
That's fine, we can take a vote.
It was a 7-1 vote, or, yeah, it was a 7-1 vote to do this the policy as it stands. It was a full review of this policy,
Okay.
absolutely.
That's fine.
It was just last year, in fact, last April, that we took the vote. I went through old minutes to find out exactly where we stood on any of this. Okay, is there anyone in the public that would like to address the board on any issue? If not, are there any board announcements or initiatives to be brought up?
There is one thing we should do, give recognition to the high school musical. The high school musical
Yep.
was last week,
Mhm.
so we should give recognition. They did a lot of hard work. Great musical, a lot of time, commitment, energy, and they did a really nice job.
Anything else? If not, I will take a motion to move to executive session for personnel and legal reasons.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.